Good morning, everybody. I thank you for being here bright and early on Thursday to get started on tomorrow, maybe. But appreciate everybody's attention, and I know the county commissioners are here, and they're meeting across the street, and Natural Resources is meeting, and surprisingly, so many of our members on Natural Resources. But we've got a special guest this morning, of course, Commissioner, who's not a stranger to any of us. And what I asked Josh to do last week was kind of bring us up to date on this funding issue, especially around the growth areas and about freight. Because I think y'all know how important that is to me. And so, Commissioner, do you want to be here or there? Or you want to sit down? Okay. We're going to make Josh stand? He need the exercise. No, Josh, we appreciate all the work you've done in the last while, especially helping me try to figure out some freight logistics issues, and I sure appreciate your help doing that. Without further ado, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to see everybody, and we will think about trying to get to tomorrow and keep this as brief as we can, but appreciate the opportunity to really talk about freight and logistics. And what I want to do today is tee up a couple of things. One is set the table just of what our Georgia's net transportation network is, and remind us all of how important and critically beneficial it is for our strategic goals of remaining the number one state to do business. So certainly want to talk about that. I want to highlight portions of the Freight Plan 2050 that our planning division under Janine Miller is working on and getting to finality. This is a lot of good work. I'm going to take some excerpts out of that. The plan is not finished. It's getting close to being finished. It is a federally required responsibility that each state submit a freight plan that has a long-term horizon on it. Again, we're going to 2050, which sounds like a long time away, but in transportation talk, that's 27 years. And as I remind you, the bigger projects take 7 to 10 years to deliver. So that 27 years can get gone in a hurry. But they've done a lot of good work. The federally compliant part of that is just to pull down the federal freight funds, which are about $46 million each year. $46 million is a lot of money, but in the portfolio of everything we do, it's not a lot of money. But we have to do that to be able to access the federal freight funds in a federal freight program, even though we spend a lot more federal dollars on other freight corridors as well. That's the federally compliant part. But what planning is doing is really truly looking at the 2050 horizon of what do we need to do to keep Georgia moving and enjoying the success we have, and what does it take to do that such that travel times and speeds and things like that I'll get into later remain the way we want them to. And then lastly, I'm going to walk through some of the major freight and logistics projects that we have either underway, meaning in development, design, or right-of-way, and finally the ones that are actually under construction, and sort of go through those things where we're making some really large investments across the state as it relates to freight and logistics. So with that, we'll move to the next slide on page 2. And this is, again, setting the table. And you've seen this slide before. It's going to be that repetitious slide I keep showing you about Georgia's transportation network of being the 10th largest transportation network in the nation. Any way you slice it, if you look at all roads and bridges, as it relates, or if you just look at state or interstates, we're still 10th largest in the nation. And so I'll remind you that we're 8th largest in the nation in population. So I always like to say if you got more population, you got transportation network, that's probably a cause for congestion sometimes. So that is the case. With over 125,000 miles of roads and right at 15,000 bridges. I remind you that Georgia has lots of interstates, but 15 of our interstates connect directly to 30% of the continental United States. So think about that. Georgia is blessed with many interstates. 15 directly connect to 30% of the continental United States, which gives us great coverage, which is certainly a benefit for freight and freight mobility. And I've told this committee before, but I remind you that if you draw a box around Georgia, you look at that picture of Georgia there, and we counted up how far everybody drives every day within the boundaries of Georgia. It's over 300 million miles driven every day on Georgia's roadways. So that's a lot of volume. And I remind you that truck volumes are at an all-time high. We saw those rebound in COVID very quickly, and truck volumes are at an all-time high and continuing to grow. Again, the other multimodal aspects that make Georgia great is the 105 airports that we have. Obviously, Hartsfield-Jackson International is the world's busiest, but all the other critical airports, and I'll talk to airports in a minute, and our transit operators, 92 transit operators, moving people to where they need to be. The rail presence, again, with our 2 Class 1s with CSX and NS, and all our short lines operating on 4,600 miles of rail. That is the most rail miles in the southeast of any other state. And of course, our partner with Georgia Ports Authority. I got 4 ports there. Obviously, 2 of those are seaports, being Brunswick and Savannah Garden City. And the other two ports are the inland port in Murray County and the one that's soon to be online in Gainesville-Hall County. So again, great reach and great access. And I always like to steal GPA's line and remind everybody that Savannah is the westernmost port on the East Coast. So there is actually a strategic advantage because being a couple hundred miles inland from New York, New Jersey gives them much greater reach to the west than we do if you're in the northeast in New York, New Jersey, who has to traverse more land distance. So sort of an interesting fact there. All right, next slide. I want to go back and give some appreciation to the work, the joint study committees that have happened in the past years. And as a little bit of a reminder, because there's a lot of new faces on this committee, and maybe didn't participate or not aware of the Freight and Logistics Study Committee that goes back to 2019, I guess maybe even 2018, that was started and even extended because of the great work that was going on that committee. And there's a great report there to pull down under H.R. 935. And then also the airport infrastructure and improvements that was finished up in 2021. Again, looking at the criticality of airports and what that means to air mobility, not only for commercial aviation, for private aviation, but then air cargo. And I'll come back later to talk about air cargo. But a lot of good work has been done and a lot of effort. And I know Abby's probably written lots of reports about freight and logistics. So let's not forget the hard work that many have done maybe before you or you were part of that. And let's go back and think about those things and pull those reports back out and look at them. Next is this is the one I like to talk to my other state DOT friends about is Georgia's economic success looking in 2022. If you look at those 358 companies making $21 billion in private investment in Georgia, I call your attention to the red box. $17.8 billion of that, or 84%, was dealing with logistics-enabled businesses. So, meaning that there is some nexus to freight and infrastructure with all these investments. And obviously, we all know about the great auto manufacturing, and Georgia is going to become the e-mobility capital of the nation, and all these logistics companies. And of course, I'll call your attention to the bottom one, agribusiness again, our number one economy, with 48 companies investing $1.4 billion and 2,600 jobs. So again, we have here is the great news story, right, that we have as Georgia, and we are continuing to do great things. And I had to use this slide because I can't keep the current slide current because there's a new job announcements every week. You know, great things. I saw Pat Wilson in the hall yesterday, and I was like, what's the great news this week? I mean, he's got always great news stories coming. So Georgia, we really are in a great place. But as we think about where we are, we want to maintain this, right? We want to be able to maintain what we enjoy today and the infrastructure we're going to need to do that as we go forward. I like to remind people that doing nothing doesn't mean things stay the same. Think about that. Doing nothing doesn't mean things stay the same. Things get worse because population grows, businesses still come here. They come here for what we have today, but if we don't make investments going forward, that will slow down for sure. So let's jump into this freight plan and again, I want to make sure I'm very clear. The planning division under Janine's leadership is responsible for this. I'm just simply lifting some of their good work and sharing with you today. And Mr. Chairman, I would suggest and hope at some point you can have Janine back as this gets formalized and get into some of the nitty gritty of this great freight plan. One of the great things that they did, yes, sir.
Mr. Commissioner, so committee, what I'll do is instead of just going, we'll kind of go to different stops. And so if you got questions, just go ahead and punch them in, and then we'll stop the commissioner. You can ask, so you can ask. I think instead of saving them to the end, Commissioner.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
I just had one I want to bring up. How far along is the Gainesville Inland Port? Where is it at?
It is. They have funding for that, and my understanding is it should start either in this calendar year at some point.
In this calendar year.
Yeah, I've been in coordination with Hall County. They certainly are trying to look for some additional funding to do some ancillary things, but it's getting close.
Okay, good. And what are we doing about planning for others? How does that work? The looking at, are we going to build one wherever, West Point or?
Yeah. So Inland Port is really a function of GPA and the railroads.
Okay.
So and then we come in ancillary to that and look at sort of the transportation network. In addition, just like the Gainesville Hall location is planning. Again, the planning division is actually doing a study now for those freight impacts of what that's going to mean to that area. And so they're doing a study of where 985 ends, 365 up to where this site's going to be.
Yes, sir.
And look at all the improvements that are going to need to be done commensurate with the growth that's going to come as part of that. So again, there's we sort of integrate together and are having to plan for those futures. But that's really a function of GPA's growth and then where the rail serves and what the commodities are and where it makes strategic sense to make that haul distance attainable to, from the coast up to the inland port to rail.
Sure. 26, who is?
That's me.
Okay, Mac.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you for being here. I was on the same line as the chairman about an inland port. I'm new to the committee. Could you talk about an inland port and the rail? You said it was a function of the rail and GPA. And what is GPA?
Georgia Ports Authority. So they really are the ones that are looking at containers, import, export, and obviously they really try to balance import, export. That's one of the great things about the Georgia Ports Authority. It's a little out of kilter due to COVID, but it used to be pretty balanced. But that is really looking at strategically where does it make sense to rail a container or around manufacturing. If we look at Murray County, you've got GE up there that's doing wonderful, continuing to grow, and they're building those durable goods, and it makes more sense to put them in the container there, rail them to Savannah, and then export, or the same thing, bring product in, and instead of having to put it on a truck to get there. And just sort of notionally now with, again, congestion, traffic, and hours of service, making a trip from Savannah with a container to Metro Atlanta, you can get to the south part of Metro Atlanta, and for anybody who lives or gets stuck in traffic in Henry County, you know why. And so that Henry County area, South Fulton Crescent, that area is in a day's drive that you can drop a container, take an empty container back to the port. So when you get north of there, it really becomes a trade-off on an economic trade-off, depending on what the material is, or if it's manufactured products. Obviously, if it's time sensitive or perishable, it will be on a truck. But they're looking at that strategically of what that is. And obviously, with in the Gainesville area, you've got a lot of poultry agribusiness. A lot of that has to be refrigerated, but also you've got Kubota sitting there, a major manufacturer. So it's a lot of industry in that area that's going to be supported. The one thing we like about the inland ports is it takes trucks off the road, right? But we have to remember, I'll show you in a minute, even though it takes trucks off the road, I'll show you the growth that it gets consumed back. But that's what that is.
Thank you, sir.
You got it. So
Go ahead, Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, I'm new to the committee, and I'm riding the same track about these inland ports, and I can have some sidebar conversations with you. But just a quick question, or which railroads serve in the Murray County inland port?
CSX.
In which railroad would, if it comes online in Gainesville, I'm just curious, would that be CSX as well?
It's Norfolk Southern.
Norfolk Southern. So none of them have both railroads. Are there any proposed locations where both railroads would be serving?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and just,
And they're going on the class ones, you know,
right.
There's opportunities. I mean, obviously, let's not forget Cordele was our first inland port, which is a privately operated rail line, short line, that does have connections back to both rail. I believe they, as I recall correctly. I may be wrong about that.
And that was going to be my final point, or any of them being served by the short lines. And so that is a short line only railroad?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for
one
letting us
thing-
do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. One thing I just want to focus on is what planning's done, and again, a lot of credit to Janine and the team, is this is totally business focused. We call this the NASCAR slide. You know, this looks like the side of the car. This is the sponsorship of all the businesses that have had multiple meetings with GDOT so that we really understand what's important to the business community. What, for these freight and logistics enabled companies, what means the most to them. And then the other thing I just call out on this while we're on this slide is that we have more data available now than we did the last time we did the freight and logistics plan now, you know, many years ago. And data is king, right? You can make good decisions based on real data. And a lot of this data is purchased. It's the same data that these companies use about freight and logistics, about real-time delivery. And so I think there's about 36 data sets that inform this this freight and logistics plan. So again, working with private sector, understanding their needs, using really good data helps us determine how do we go forward. And on the next slide this is what the business community said. This is what's important to them that really helps the return on investment and their bottom line decisions in business is reliability. That's meaning picking up and delivering in the window that is allotted. As you know, you see trucks parked a lot of places. They're waiting on their time to get in and out of the manufacturing facility or warehouse distribution. So investments that help reliability and predictability. That's one of the things the freight and logistics business will say. If it's predictable, we can plan for it. Even if it's not what they want in time, but if it's predictable. And then the next thing is speed, right? With reliability, you get speed, which is very important, that door-to-door travel time. What is the average truck speed that they can maintain? And when I say average truck speed, you're probably thinking 70 miles an hour. No, this is, when you look at average speeds, it's just door-to-door, so it's much less than that. But that speed is consistent because the speed, reliability and speed then go to that next thing is cost. What is their shipping cost? And we've had a lot of conversation recently, and you've heard the shipping cost is one of the bigger impacts to what things ultimately cost. Is what's that impact? So congestion costs have an impact on product if it increased delivery times. And then the risk is, as every business and everything anybody does, there's always risk associated. But that's really the interference in operations or that really disrupts what they do. When they have disruptions, it has an impact. And then last, but always should be first, is safety and security. Obviously, every business is worried about insurance costs. They're worried about what wrecks and their people. And safety is always the first on everybody's list. But as it relates to that, reduced crashes is good for everybody, right? That's something we all agree on, is that reducing crashes is good for everybody. So that's what the business has said. This is the things that matter to us. And with that, then this is how the freight plan is being developed. So now I'm going to jump into some takeaways from the freight plan. So we go back to 2019 because we had to normalize data. Everything changed in 2020, as we know, as it relates to freight and logistics. But we go back to 2019 and look at how much tonnage was moved across Georgia. And I know this is a little bit small map, but 500 million tons, or a little over 500, it's actually over 500 million tons of goods, be it agribusiness, manufactured, e-commerce, moved on Georgia's roadways. And if you look at this map a little bit, the darker and the fatter the line, these are freight flows. This is where the tonnage moves. So this map actually shows you, in the fatter the line, the more tonnage. So look at our interstates, right? Sort of a no-brainer. Interstates are darker and a little bit wider. But look at all the other roadway networks that are blue, darker blue, or almost black. And you look at that across this state, and you can see some really, really, depending on where your district is, you can see some things pop out that you probably anecdotally know. But this just really shows sort of the baseline of what was moving in 2019. And as I told you before, truck volume is higher now than it was in 2019. It had to correct through the pandemic, but it's higher. So that's the baseline. Let's go to the next slide, because this is a breakdown of that 500 million, actually 585 million tons that were moved in Georgia. And this is very fascinating, because I get a question all the time is, what are you guys doing to get freight around Atlanta? Let's get this freight out of Georgia. I draw your attention to the bottom of the table. It says through. There's only 20% of the freight traffic that moves through Georgia. 80% of freight traffic is either coming in Georgia, originates, or ends in Georgia. So there's not a big portion of freight, even though 115 million tons is a lot. The biggest portion of freight is coming to us here in Georgia, or we generate it ourselves. So this is a breakdown by inbound coming in, outbound going out, and then within, and then the through movement. So not as much through movement as you think. 585 million tons moved in Georgia. Okay? Now let's fast forward to 2050 for what this plan says. And hang on, put your seatbelt on here. So we predict and forecast, using very good data sources, as I mentioned, that we grow from almost 600 million to 1.12 million, or call that billion tons. That's a 92% increase, so almost doubling of the tonnage that will be moved in Georgia based on manufacturing, agribusiness, and e-commerce. And so you can see the compound annual growth rate in that far right corner. Everything except inbound, which is right at 1.9, rounded to 2%. Everything is 2% or greater compound annual growth. And just think about that like simple interest. So it's really stepping up, and you can see the overall percentage change by inbound, outbound, within, and through, which grows significantly. So the takeaway here is by 2050, 27 years from now, you can expect double the freight volume moving on Georgia's roadways and transportation network. That's pretty.
Where's my reporter at? That ought to scare you good, right? That'll be a good comment. 16. Who's that? Spencer? Mr. Fry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, thank you, Commissioner. I'm a big fan, and I think that you guys have done a great job doing all this, and we want to support you 1,000,000% in keeping the roads up. What is there a correlation between a proper correlation that we can derive from the 92% greater traffic? Does that mean we're going to need 92% more funding in order for the maintenance and to keep up the work that you guys have been doing? I mean, really, is there a way to figure out that number in advance that we can think about it?
Yeah, thank you for that. That is, let's save that toward the end, and your answer's right, and we'll start at 92 as a marker and go up from there. So, but there is a causal relationship, and that's part of this plan, and I'll sort of sum that up. But you're spot on. There is certainly a relationship. All right, so let's take a little bit deeper dive into what this really means. The next slide is the manufacturing sector. And again, the planning did a fantastic job breaking out commodities, manufacturing, durable goods, agribusiness, and e-commerce. And so I'm going to walk through those. We'll start with manufacturing. 77% growth in manufacturing. And this map This map, again, the darker the color, the more tons, and K tons is kilotons, which is 1,000 tons. So the numbers you see there, with Gwinnett, when manufacturing at 38,298, you got to multiply that times 1,000 to get tons. So it's 38,000 kilotons of manufacturing. And these may jump out at you as the darker, again, the darker the color, the more the tons of manufacturing that are forecast. And I'll tell you what's wrong with this slide. And I'm going to caveat, a lot of these slides may be a little bit wrong because of all these continued announcements that we're getting. Okay, so if you look down in the bottom southeast there at Chatham and Bryan and Bullock, this chart was developed before the Hyundai announcement was made, and all the ancillary things that go along with it. So just know that that's going to get even darker in that southeast part of the state, and as far as Rivian and the like over in Newton, Walton, and that part of the world. So again, this sort of shows you where tonnage is growing for manufacturing. And again, this is based on forecasting, modeling, and based on data-driven. This is not a guess. This is data-driven. So let's go over to agribusiness, the next slide. Again, 43% growth based on the projected gross state product and freight intensity needs. And then again, you can see the counties that jump out there. Jackson County and my old stomping grounds up there in Franklin County, continuing to grow a lot of agricultural products and livestock as well. And of course, Hall County, I've already invoked Hall County twice now, I guess, as poultry capital of the world. So, right, we're going to still eat more chicken, right? So you can see that. And again, what is no surprise here is you look at the southwest part of the state, where agriculture is so key to Georgia's economy, and you can see those darker counties in the sort of middle to southwest part of the state. So there's really no surprise that. And I relate this back on agribusiness as we think about population growth. As Georgia continues to grow and our population is still forecast to grow by a couple million people in the next census, we have to feed people, right? We have to feed people, and then the other thing we like to do is export that agribusiness to other states and other countries as well. So a lot of in agribusiness too, and is forest products and everything that we've previously talked about is rolled up in this agribusiness look. So it's not just agricultural being row crops and livestock. It includes forest products and the like.
Commissioner, we got one question. 25.
Thank you very
I
much.
figured I called you. I've not mentioned you, Hall County twice, so
I
you got to
know.
jump in.
Thank you for being here, and I appreciate everything y'all do. I had one question, especially in my area, and I'm sure in people's other area. We talked about trucks, and you had mentioned truck parking, and I noticed it seems like there's been an uptick, maybe not, of trucks parking on the off and on ramps and actually on the side of the expressway. And I was just curious if we have any kind of long-term plan of putting in more rest areas, or maybe a public-private rest areas, or even increasing some we have. I know, especially around the inland ports, like in my area, it seems like now they're bad. So when inland port gets here, they don't have anywhere to park, and I understand their dilemma. They have to stop and rest. So I just wanted to ask you that.
Yeah, that is absolutely part of the freight plan that has to be done. And what we are currently doing is we're in the engineering phase now of everywhere we have public parking at rest areas and welcome centers and way stations. We're going to expand it to the maximum footprint we can within the property we have. So we're actively doing that. But the statistic of truck parking is, and I won't get this right, but let's just say by far, 90% or so is all private. And so we do look for the private sector to solve it. It's not solving it now. To your point, is there a public-private solution here? Not only Georgia, but the rest of the states are dealing with the same thing. We think, I personally think there's probably some solution there. We want the private sector to try to solve it first, but also we've got to provide for the public good as well. And your observations are spot on, as there's more trucks parked on ramps now because of the logs. When their time's up, they've got to find somewhere to park, and the electronic logs have changed some things, and so it's a big issue. But
And we'll get you the. You're 24 or 5. In the last freight logistics that we worked on, the big report, there's a great section in there. We'll get it to you on truck parking.
Okay. Well, one follow-up, and I noticed some other states, me and you've talked about other states and what they're doing, but I noticed Florida a lot of times have parking on, off and on-ramp rest areas, if you will, but they've put, say, for instance, a Burger King or whatever. I guess that's a private, and I noticed Georgia never has done that. Is that something that we could possibly, in your opinion, do maybe in the future?
It is federally prohibited to do that on interstates, and what you see in Florida is on turnpikes, which are not federal.
Thank you. Take off.
Okay.
Good.
All right, next slide. And this is why I said I can't keep my slides updated. I just want to show you this little map. If you look at all the dots, and you can see all the auto manufacturers that are in and around in Georgia, obviously our great partner with Kia and Bluebird that many of you have toured before, but now with Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, and Rivian, and all the tier 1 suppliers and all their supports, there's going to be more dots popping up on this map. But what's interesting, when you look at the auto suppliers on the little dots, look at where they are. They're all over Georgia. They're not just over in West Point, Georgia, or LaGrange, or down on the coast. They're everywhere. But there's going to be more dots pop up, and I can tell you, with conversations with many of your counties, as Hyundai, Genesis, Kia, and Rivian ramp up, there's a lot of activity in your industrial development authorities. And a lot of needs that are coming, and we got a lot of ask right now for helping with funding to get some infrastructure in place for these things. So that's why I said outdated. Is if I updated this slide, it'd be outdated tomorrow probably. So just again, auto manufacturing is going to drive things, and this is again 50 plus employees. So there may be some smaller companies that don't even show up on this map. All right, so we've talked about manufacturing, we've talked about agribusiness. The one that some of you may even be ordering something online right now while we're talking, don't admit that, please, is e-commerce. We've seen e-commerce grow through the roof. We all know the story during COVID, how we all ordered everything and it arrived on our doorstep. This chart basically shows compound annual growth rates up the y-axis, the vertical axis, and it gives you some perspective on the impact across the bottom axis, the horizontal axis, of the impact on infrastructure. And you can see that e-commerce is the biggest bubble, the highest up and furthest to the right, meaning that as a percentage of compound annual growth year over year out to 2050, it has probably the most impact on the transportation network than anything. And if you think about it, well, you got more things being delivered to your house. And if you're like my house, I'll get, there's probably 2 or 3 different trucks from different companies that land something on my front door every day. And so this e-commerce, as we showed you earlier, is going to continue to grow exponentially. But e-commerce means that it takes warehouse distribution fulfillment centers to satisfy our demands to have things delivered on our front doors. So the next slide gets at what this looks like as a 2019 comparison to 2050 comparison. And if you look at the 2 colors, there's a gray color, which is how much is moved on rail to warehouse distribution centers and how much is moved by truck. You can see this exponential growth of basically 54 million tons in 2019 to 2050, 203 million tons of warehouse distribution. And you can see the percentage that are moved by rail and truck. Again, when it comes to, we love to get things on rail, you can see that rail share sort of goes down in the future. And that's probably, again, dealing with proximity of more warehouse distribution facilities being built and come online, where we expect things to be delivered on our door same day, if not next day, right? Or not, with maybe in a few hours. And so you've got to get more warehouse distribution there, which then railing things take a little bit longer. So that's probably why you see that share going down. What's interesting, too, is the columns on the right, value. And I will say, again, this is a very abbreviated presentation from the freight plan. One of the things that the planning division and Janine have done is look at the value of these items being transported, because that helps you get to ROI. And you can see that the value of the goods that are moved correlating to the tons grow exponentially as well. So the long horizon for e-commerce looks good. You know, it's still a growth. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
We have a question for you. 18? Is that?
That's me. But looking at this 2050, do we have any predictions of where we'll be in terms of autonomous vehicles doing a lot of this transportation by then?
Yeah, it's hard to know. It's not baked into this. This is, again, more higher level, but levels of autonomy certainly could happen by 2050. But it's not sort of the outcome of this effort.
Okay.
Can it happen? Yeah. I mean, there's probably more delivery bots you'll see, you know, around corners beside Domino's doing pizzas that way. I mean,
Right.
that's going to become a more reality.
Well, I'm thinking more too, just about more, you know, the big rigs, the 18-wheelers. Like, you know, I would imagine, maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, and I'm like not being facetious. Like, I would think that there'll probably be a little more autonomy with that, which I think will help with safety. But I just don't know if we have any, if anybody had any.
Well,
No, not GDOT, just if
Yeah.
anybody out there
Well,
had that kind of information.
I can give you some of my experience. I'm fortunate to serve on an international scan as part of the Transportation Research Board, and we've been looking at autonomous vehicles now for many years, and I've visited with many companies, including a company called Too Simple, who is doing autonomous trucking. They're hauling now from California through the Midwest. Too Simple has made it to the East Coast as well, but they're autonomous tractor trailers. We have a driver shortage. This body's heard that many times. Driver shortages across the nation. Autonomy has a solution, and the other part of that is the efficiency, because there's not driver logs and you know, the driver fatigue that you have to deal with. It's just a matter of the safety and which they've been driving millions of miles very safe. And I think that long haul trucking has probably the first success in that, because the interstates are a lot easier to navigate, a lot easier to get there. And then the last mile, once they get off the interstate, you probably need a safety driver to get it the rest of the way and back into the dock. But there's many companies. Too Simple is this one. There's many other companies at the Class 8 tractor trailer levels that are doing autonomous driving now. And so I do think that's part of the ultimate solution for, as you see, these freight growth. It's just not baked into this kind of what portion of that may be.
That makes total sense. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Have it.
Thank you. Okay, let's jump in. And again, I'm still in plannings, a lot of plannings work here. As we've talked about the growth in the port, they have done what was called a Coastal Empire study, looking specifically at Bryan County, Bullitt County, Chatham, and Effingham, that 4-county area. And we know with the port's great growth, and yesterday was a Freight and Logistics Summit down in Savannah, and the state of the port, I believe. We've seen a lot of, 20% growth from 2020 to 2021. Obviously, a little bit of growth is slowing down right now with the economy, but Port of Savannah has just seen exponential growth. They have the ability to handle a 60% increase in capacity by 2025. Okay, 2025 is right around the corner. They're expanding to be able to handle, and that's the one thing great about Savannah is they have land. It's the largest land port, single operated land port in the nation, bigger than New York, New Jersey, and L.A. Long Beach, because they're a single entity and have the most land to expand. So they're going to grow their capacity by 60% by 2025. What we saw in that study, again, this is not quite finalized, so I'm giving you a little bit of a preview. 75% of those containers are destined for those 4 counties. Think about that. All the things that are coming in, they land at the port, and 75% of it lands in those 4 counties, and then it's either broken down, separated, and then distributed. Right. So a lot of those are, that's a huge impact. And what they saw in this study is right now there's 100 million square feet of warehouse distribution in the 4-county area. 10 years is forecast to double. I'll say that again. In 10 years, the warehouse distribution, and when you go down to Savannah and you see all those warehouse distribution facilities, it's going to double within 10 years. I'll go back to how long it takes for us to deliver a project. A big infrastructure project takes us 7 to 10 years. So if we start today, we won't keep up with what the industry is going to do based on this data source that we've seen. And if you want to keep the travel times similar today, that those 4 counties, and Colonel Hitchens knows that in that 4-county, you can pretty much get around within an hour or less today. But if you want to keep an hour travel time or less in those areas, it's probably going to take at least $1 billion of investment to address the needs of all the upgrades that are going to need to be made. So that's huge. 4 counties, at least $1 billion of investment to try to satisfy, again, the horizon to 2050. That's not $1 billion tomorrow, but it's $1 billion or more to get you to where you want to be by 2050, such that you can still travel within an hour or 45 minutes in that 4-county area, which is key to the freight movement. If it takes 2 hours or 3 hours, guess what? You're like LA Long Beach. Your trucks are stuck. They're not moving, which is not good for anybody. So a fantastic body of work they've done there. More to come on that. Let me just go next to air cargo. As I mentioned, airports and the joint study committee that everybody worked on. This is very impressive. As we look at the 105 airports, there's 870 air cargo generators that do about $3 billion in domestic commodities each year and about $27 billion in international in and out of Georgia every year. So this shows you down at sort of the bottom, shows you what are the domestic things that are being moved outbound: pharmaceuticals, motor vehicle parts. Motor vehicle parts probably moves up. Electronics, machinery, and textiles and leather. So those are the things that are being moved, and you can see the generators too of aerospace, automotive, fulfillment, distribution, medical, and then pharmaceuticals again. So things that are perishable, things that are needed quickly, or what's moving on air cargo. But it's a huge impact. Our study identified about $104 million of needs, especially across 4 major airports. All airports need work, but Albany was certainly identified. Savannah, Hilton Head, Statesboro, Bullitt County, and Swainsboro, certainly they were all identified that what we need. And we know from this study that $1 of investment generates $88 in total economic impact from this economic impact study that we've done. So again, let's not forget the air cargo. We focus on rail and trucks and ports a lot, but let's not forget the air cargo is a very critical link to our future as well. All right, let me move into the last part of this presentation just to show you and update you on some of the freight investments that we're doing. Next slide is the Major Mobility Investment Program, which is all about moving people and goods. And we've been after this since about 2016, making many advancements. We have major interchanges identified. And I'll jump into 1695 down in Savannah, but also I-20 at 285 on the west side of town and the east side of town. I'll take a deeper dive into those. Building express lanes. And we know that when we build express lanes for people to use, it frees up capacity in the general purpose lanes. And we saw a tremendous benefit on the Northwest Corridor on I-75 up in Cobb and Cherokee counties for freight when we opened that corridor. Because the people that's using the express lanes, it made the general purpose lanes better, and freight flowed better, and everybody flowed better. So it's a win-win. And we're working on express lanes basically around 285, and currently in procurement on State Route 400 to add express lanes. Major interstate widenings. These are sort of the no-brainers, right? We're going to have to continue to widen our interstates, and we had 2 phases of 85 as we're working our way and marching our way towards South Carolina. We actually have a 3rd phase that's under construction now that gets up to Commerce, Georgia, US 441. And if you might remember, that's where SK is. SK Battery is right there at that location. And I'll talk about those. We have a commercial vehicle lane I'll talk about. And we're doing a lot of work on 285, getting ready for these other express lanes. So a lot of work going on. Let's jump in a little deeper on the next slide. I-20 at 285 on the east side of Atlanta over in DeKalb County. We're actually already under construction. We're under contract. This was a $788 million project to upgrade I-20 and 285 on the east side. We're using a contract form called Design Build Finance, working with our partners at CERTA. There's no toll involved, so don't worry about that. But this is where the contractor basically finances most of the construction, and we pay them back over a period of time once it's complete, usually in a 3 to 5 year window. to advance a big project, another, $788 million project for one project here. A major project. You'll see some construction start this year, actually see some dirt turning, and completion is 2025. And I might add, if you look down there, at the very bottom is ATRI's, the American Transportation Research Institute. Those are the people that measure freight bottlenecks. I struck out 21 because last year it was 21st. It's the 17th most congested freight bottleneck in the nation. And so just give you some perspective. The next is I-20 at 285 on the west side, over by the river and Six Flags area, if you know where that is. Again, this is the 5th worst truck bottleneck in the nation. This is not the top 10 list you want to be on, right? So number 2 is Spaghetti Junction, by the way, at I-85 and 285. This project is, we're in procurement now. We're doing some early right-of-way acquisition. We've had a lot of public meetings. We anticipate getting bids in 2024. This project would be $1 billion or more. It's design, build, finance, again, looking to the private sector to actually finance part of the construction, and we pay, as the state, pay them back over a 3 to 5 year term once it's completed. Again, that's why we're having to do things this way, because obviously you do that project's almost $1 billion. This one's $1 billion. I remind you, our capital construction budget that we bid last year is about $1.6 billion. So if you did one project, that'd be about it for the state. So we have to figure out how to continue to drive these projects forward. Next slide is a little prettier, more fun to look at. I-16, I-95 down in Savannah, a $317 million design build project. We hope and expect completion, or the major components of this, to be completed by the end of this calendar year. It's been a challenge on this project due to supply chain issues and being able to get the materials needed. But it also widens I-16 down to 516. So from I-95 down into Savannah at 516 will be 6-laned, including the upgrade of this very innovative, it's called a turbine interchange, so that those tractor trailers don't go across those loop ramps and turn over anymore. They have these big flyover ramps that they're able to circumnavigate a little more efficiently and effectively, and obviously safely. So a big project there is, when you go to Savannah, you can't miss it. It's a big project. We reconstruct 6 bridges, we replace 4 bridges, and build 3 new bridges, and of course widen I-16. Again, $317 million. Next project I want to talk about is the one that's further out on the horizon. Is building commercial vehicle lanes on I-75 from 475 down just north of Macon all the way up into Henry County. And this is separating the tractor trailers from the cars. So there will be 2 new lanes that are separated, physically separated, for that freight movement, because we see that I-75 is the freight artery not only of Georgia, but really the eastern seaboard. Most people think it's I-95. I-95 carries a lot of traffic up in the northeast, but I-75 is the freight artery, main freight artery in our state for sure. It's 41 miles, $2 billion. Did I hear 2.5? Anybody got? No, I'm just kidding. Sounds like
I heard a whoa right here.
yeah, right.
So let's pause a minute.
Okay.
24 was.
Thank you,
Bruce.
Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on that particular project. Of the $2 billion, how much of that is construction costs versus land acquisition?
The majority of this is construction. I don't have the breakdown. I can get it. We are having to do a land acquisition, but it's not large land acquisition. A lot of it's actually what we call strip acquisition. So I'll have to get that to get the breakdown. In this case, the largest part of it's the constructability part.
Because, obviously, it's a lot easier to acquire land there where you don't have infrastructure, plant equipment, utilities, and all that to have to move, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. So the way we approach this project.
One more. We got one more.
Okay.
Number 9, is that Mr. Holly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner Murray. I think, Murray, you've actually helped to save the day in a lot of respects, just mention this. Small questions. How far does this stretch up from, is this intended to stretch up from 475 to up to, I guess, 675 possibly, or is
No,
it that
this
far?
section gets up to State Route 155.
155. Okay.
Which is, obviously, a very busy location.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is where that goes. There is a new interchange associated with this called Bethlehem Road that's in Henry County, that's
Yep.
south of 155, that will certainly provide relief to 155 and Bill Gardner Parkway.
Yep.
And it not only is this an interchange, but it connects over to 42 and connects over on the west side of that industrial park road. So we'll get a lot of that warehouse distribution getting to this new interchange.
So it'll divert away from I guess the 26,000 square foot of siding that will come through like Norfolk Southern.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have coordinated with that potential rail siding.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
25.
Sorry, one. So can you talk? I've never seen one of these, which doesn't mean anything. But can you talk about? Is that 2 lanes going one way, and is it switchable? And how? Just kind of talk about the.
Thank you. When you see this one, you've seen the first in the nation. The only thing similar to this is on a turnpike up in New Jersey going into the port, where they do separate the trucks and the cars and a turnpike, but that's a toll facility. So the reason this is one way is when our previous freight plan is obviously there's more tonnage moving to Metro Atlanta, and we would like to do this southbound. But when we put this in place back in 2016 and 2017, financially we just can't do the southbound piece. The southbound has more empties going back, but we do have a lot of export. And as you just saw out of this new freight plan, that's going to be a consideration, is we're going to have to look at I-75 in totality, not just this section, but pretty much all of Georgia is going to have to be looked at for I-75. And let me get to this $2 billion price tag, which is huge. It's 41 miles of new interstate, though, and that's not done very often. The way we'll have to do this is through a contracting method called design, build, finance, operate, and maintain, of where we enter into a 35 to 50-year contract that the private sector will fund it, finance it, and then we'll pay them back just like a mortgage payment every year for this investment, because we don't have the dollars to do this now. Now, we will certainly seek some federal grants and try to get some, try to drive down the cost where we can, not drive down the cost, but procure some other dollars to help with the funding of this. This project is still a little ways out because of the funding. We won't start the procurement until calendar year 2025. And it'll take a few years to get to procurement. We would anticipate opening to traffic probably around the year 2031 under our current schedule. So it's still a ways away. We're actually doing the design. You can go on the internet and you can click on this simulation and ride along, and you can see what this looks like. Most all of it's on the east side, or going the northbound side to the east, outside of 75, except in the city of Forsyth. Most of it's in the middle, because we're trying to, again, limit the impacts to the right-of-way, to your question, and it's raised up. So we've been working with the city, and they've been great partners to work with us in that area. So again, if you talk about freight and logistics, this is it's a safety benefit. When we did the studies long ago, the highest percentage of crashes involve tractor trailers. The highest percentage of fatalities on this section of road, even though it's a small percentage of crashes, the highest percentage of fatalities were involved in tractor trailers on this corridor. So separating them is a benefit for them, because it's better for them to drive safely. To the technology question of autonomy, you'll feel much safer if there's trucks that are technologically called platooning, where there may be nose to tail, that they're all connected virtually and they're driving along. You'll feel much better than driving next to them if there's four tractor trailers all connected nose to tail like a train. So it's a lot of good benefits: safety benefit, competitive benefit of the freight movement in Georgia, and just preparing for the growth in traffic. So it's sort of like the traffic growth, not the freight growth, but the traffic growth gets the benefit when you get the trucks out of the existing lanes. You don't have to widen I-75 for the existing lanes. So a big project, and we're well along on our way, actually doing some early acquisitions of parcels now.
Got a couple of questions, just one. Mr. McDonald.
Two questions. From the emergency services side on this, will they have access to use this
Yes.
without? Okay,
And
that was-
we've actually been having meetings with the first responders, emergency folks along the way of how
pretty big.
do you access. And there are ramps, again, there are ramps strategically where you can get in and out. We're not gonna say you have to as a truck to use this, but I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to use it. But there's ramps strategically where you get in and out. And, also there's ramps down in Forsyth that gets to the weigh station. We'll do the weigh in motion again, just like we do. But if you know where that weigh station is northbound, there's a way to get in that as well, so.
When will the bidding process start on this, and like, how will that process?
We will,
take place?
yeah, so it'll be a best value selection of this big design, build, finance, operate, maintain procurement. That'll be late in 2026.
Okay.
I just have one question, Commissioner, just on mine. Since it's an interstate project, how do federal funds link into this?
Yeah, we certainly will be using federal funds to help advance this. And again, this is a mortgage payment approach, and
Okay.
we'll be using federal funds for a long time to sort of pay the mortgage.
Okay,
It'll be federal and state.
okay. Mr. McCollum,
Sorry, one more.
Thanks.
I'm asking Chairman Williamson's question. So, why couldn't this be tolled? Is that possible that we could make it a toll road?
We can have that conversation.
And then, so this would be a P3 project, which I've learned about with the bill. Is that correct? Which
This is a form of public-private partnership.
okay,
yes.
because that's a very in-depth thing. It took me a while to figure it out, and I'm not sure if I'm 100%. But I know a lot of when I brought the bill in front of this committee, they wasn't sure exactly how it worked. So I don't know if that's something.
So
not just a small part, but
That's what you brought was a little different form of public-private, but this is truly a public-private partnership.
go ahead. Got
No,
one.
real quick, you
My
got to
neighbor
spark
here.
something. So thank you. Of course, of the project that's going on in Forsyth County, the 400 project, I've met with the group that's doing that. Kind of tell me it seems like a lot of people from not in America are very, I guess, got a lot of interest in Georgia. That's really interesting to see that the focus that people from around the world really want to invest. Can you tell us a little
Sure.
bit about that?
Yeah, so on these big projects like this, most of the companies that are interested are equity companies to begin with. And so if there's a toll involved, okay, let's make sure like 400 express lanes and 285 express lanes. So these are international, mainly international companies that have equity that do concession models or P3 models across the world for airports, infrastructure, highways, transport, as they call them in Europe. And so these are big equity companies that some are very vertically integrated that may have a engineering company and a construction company and an operations company. Some are equity, and then they hire engineers, constructors, and then operators in that matter. So I can tell you I've had a lot of meetings on obviously the P3 front over the last several years. Equity would love to do business in Georgia. Georgia is known, this #1 state to do business. We have a AAA bond rating. We're seen as a very responsible state, financially, fiscally strong. So equity's looking a place to put money, right? And so they have a lot of interest in Georgia. And that makeup's all different too. Even though some of them are international companies, I know in, I think Virginia, one of their biggest parts of their partners was basically a teacher's retirement pension. And so pensions and things like that are part of the equity portfolios that they look for, because these are long-term, stable investments. It's not going to be a wildly return on investment, but it's a very stable, long-term investments from the equity point of view. So, so that's just that perspective.
Do we
And
have anything in place, like with these equity companies that are coming in to protect, our Georgia companies from doing business
oh yeah,
with them?
well absolutely.
Sorry.
The first thing they look for is contractors, local contractors.
Okay.
Because that's what it takes to build a job. So. That's one of the challenges now, as we've talked about, is workforce and labor. And by all means, they will look for the Georgia teams and the Georgia contractors, and they're going to be buying Georgia aggregate. They're going to be buying the concrete, the asphalt, and the materials are all going to be bought here in Georgia.
Good.
All right.
Mr. Holly, he's got a question.
And I'll be quick with it because I know we are still continuing. Thank you for allowing us to interrupt you through this presentation. Commissioner, I was curious about, I know, you've been working locally within like the Southern Crescent regional counties regarding this I-75 corridor commission to bring down money from the federal government towards the expansion of perhaps a train line. I think we've been talking about this since I've been in high school. Would the funding that you would draw down from the federal government to be able to help to just match up with this public-private partnership funding, would the plans be in place to also fund that side of it in terms of running in-person transit between 475 and up through, I guess, was it Macon, Henry, and up into these other corridors, or would this be separate? Because I would, hate to see that locals who are lobbying the feds to try to get this off the ground, if this would actually conflict with plans that GDOT is already.
No, it doesn't conflict at all. This is all about freight movement and then this doubling of tonnage that's going to happen, and it actually makes what I call people mobility better because you've got tractor trailers segregated now from a safety operational point of view, so the people flow. As it relates to the rail, is we were actually about to select a consultant to start the Atlanta, Macon, Savannah passenger rail study, and so you may have heard about it from high school, but it's real now. So,
it's real.
And we have the funding in place through congressionally directed spending to do that study that gets us through work. It's about 2 years, at least 2 years of work though, to get to an informed decision of what this looks like as it relates to passenger rail.
Oh, small follow-up. I think just to speak to Representative Newlett's her discussion of e-transit. I know the airport CIDs have been particularly focused with having an autonomous personal transit similar to what's found at the Heathrow Airport in London. Is that being? Do you see that as being feasible in terms of the public-private partnerships to come that would help build out the mobility? For these plans.
I do. I think what they're doing and their partnership with ATL as well and working through those things, I do think that's a feasible approach.
Okay. Thank you.
And we'll let Chairman Newton.
Mr. McMurray, thank you. The equity model that you were describing, those are strictly toll related. Is that what makes them interesting with the long term?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're looking at ways, and you mentioned earlier you're going to get to finance somewhere, and I don't want to slow you down because I'm sure there's a combination of gas tax. We've got to figure out about electric vehicles. We've got to, but how big a piece could that be? And do you need anything from the legislature to be able to look at multiple ways of paying for things, including equity with toll roads, which once again, like the express lanes, they pull enough traffic off that the expressway, the public road works better, even though there's.
I think with a little bit of the cleanup that we've talked about earlier today is what we have legislatively, we're in a pretty good place. And so it gives us the tools to look at these innovative ways to do public-private partnerships. And again, express lanes work where they work. They're not a solution everywhere. And so I will tell you too that if you say that you're mandatory truck tolling, that's a no starter. I mean we tried that a long time ago. It's not from a mandatory point of view, but I think legislatively we're in a good spot, and we have the tools in the toolbox that we can be strategic and use. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead.
All right, next slide. We'll jump down. Let's jump down to Savannah. Again, I'm talked about our partnership with GPA. Griff, Lynch, and myself, we meet regularly and stay in coordination. But this is just a little bit of what we call the last mile, even though it's a little bit further than a mile from the coast, of investments that we've made over the last, I'd say, 5 to 6 years, and some that are currently going on. It's 10 projects, over $600 million invested in these projects. We talked about 1695. That's down at the bottom. I talked about those in a minute ago. But Jimmy DeLoach Parkway was one of those big improvements, basically building a freeway right to the gate of the port. That was done, it's been about 5-6 years ago now that it's been open. A big investment there. The thing that we have under construction now, that's what the U/C means, is under construction, is I-16-I-95, as I mentioned, but something called the Brampton Road Connector, which comes right off the end of a freeway and bridges the railroad so that rail traffic's not blocking car traffic and truck traffic going into the port. So a big, I think it's about a $100 million project there. So big project going on, but this shows you the impacts and the things that we've done in and around the port, again, trying to keep those containers and freight moving in that area. Next slide gets to US 17 Savannah River Bridge, or the Talmadge Bridge is called, and just an update of what we're doing there. And this relates to that legislation that we were talking about, doing something called construction manager general contractor. These two bridges I show you are not in Georgia. One's in Malaysia, which is obviously not Georgia. The Luling Bridge is actually in Louisiana, and it's a cable stay bridge built a little bit after the Talmadge Bridge, and basically back in, let me look at my note here, 2009, they had to go in and replace the cables. There are cables on these bridges have to be maintained and replaced over time. They're under constant strain, as you can imagine. And so this was one of the bridges that has the cables that have been replaced. This is on I-49 and I-10, just right outside New Orleans, if you've ever been across the Luling Bridge there. But we've got to do the same for the Talmadge Bridge, is replace the cables. It was opened in 1992. It's time to replace the cables. And as we do that, based on the ship traffic, we're going to, while doing that, seek to raise the bottom of the deck or raise the bridge up to help what's called the air draft from the water surface to the bottom of the bridge. And so we have a maintenance project, but also in doing that, we believe it's feasible due to engineering analysis to gain some elevation of the bridge deck, if you will, which certainly will help the Ports Authority as they bring in these bigger ships. And so this is not the ultimate solution. This is sort of the best of the both worlds. We need to do the maintenance, but while we're doing the maintenance, let's see what we can get as far as helping the ships get under the bridge. And so the CMGC part of that is we're going to hire, we as DOT hires a very specialty cable contractor, bridge cable contractor. There's not many people that build these kind of bridges in the world. And then separately, we hire a contractor that's a specialty cable contractor that does this kind of work. We put them together on a team that we control, and they develop the plans and the specs and actually the costing of what it will cost to do this work. And then at that point, we have a third-party engineer that we hire, third-party engineer, that does an analysis of the contractor's cost proposal. And if we agree and that is the good cost, then we move forward with that engineering contractor to finish the work. If we disagree on the cost, we take the plans that they finished designing and then we simply bid that work out. So that's what CMGC is, and this is the only project we're doing this on. It's a very specialized project. It's the right tool, back to the tools in the toolbox. It's the right tool to bring the best contractors, the best designers that do these specialty projects, to put them together to come up with the design and the work. And then the good thing is, again, from a competitive point of view, we can move forward. If we can't agree on price, we can bring it forward and competitively bid it separately beside this best value selection that we go through. So very complicated.
So they had to explain that to me 3 times, and he just explained it once. Does anybody have a question? I got 17 down here.
It's me.
Mr. Cox.
Yo, Cox.
I mean,
It's early.
Sorry.
He hasn't had his coffee yet.
got my brain.
So everything you just said, this is why when I bring HB 52 back to the well, now you know. You got it from the man himself. So that's
you.
that HB 52 is specifically the one that he's referencing.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And, the thing to keep in mind is that what I liked hearing about it when it got through with this, that we keep the plans. We're not dedicated. We're not tied to that company. We can back out, take the plans, bid them out, and which we paid for,
Correct.
and which gives us control, gives them control over the development of the plan and everything. I just thought was pretty innovative. 25.
So are we going to eventually have to replace the bridge? I mean, as far as height wise, and then one other question: is tunneling? Is that just way expensive? Is that possible on that river?
So first question is yes. All the Ports Authority need to have a higher air draft based on the ships that are getting bigger. And I'm going to tell you, I was on this bridge when we built it, so that's why my hair looks the way it looks now, and the lack of it. But when it was built, it was the solution. There was no ship bigger than about 14,000, maybe 12,000 TEU at the time. Now there's 14, 16, 18,000 TEUs being contemplated, and the shipping business model just changed. And the urban legend, and I believe it to be true, is the commissioner at the time was Tom Moreland when this was designed, and he asked them to put some additional height on it just to be careful, just to be safe. And it's still not safe. It's safe. Hold on, let me anybody watching? The bridge is safe.
Yeah.
But from an engineering point of view, they were just saying, well, if we think we need this, let's add some more elevation to it, and it's inadequate. So, to your other question, is an analysis of what the solution would be over or under is to be determined, and either solution to replace this by whatever over or under is you're talking billions of dollars. Say again, I'm sorry.
Under would be permanent. We would never have to worry about it again.
That is correct.
That was kind of my point.
That's a fair observation. If you look at Norfolk, Virginia, with all the Navy ships, Navy yards, they don't have any bridges in Norfolk. Everything's a tunnel.
Okay. I thought you were going to ask me if you could put a toll lane on there. A toll tunnel? No. Mr. Holly, next.
Commissioner, I'm just curious. Thank you for explaining the construction manager, general contractor scheme. I was just curious. I would think that if you're going to bring in the contractor, they design it. If just in the unlikelihood, or who knows, if they don't. If they design it, but they're not fit enough to be able to keep on, are they going to be are they readily able to still give you the design that they designed to allow for somebody else to go on and fit the bill?
Yeah, that's part of the contracting, and that's sort of the neat thing is we hire the designer, so they work for GDOT. Mm-hmm. We hire the constructor, and we're paying them for their construction expertise and the technology and everything, and means and methods of how they would do this. So we're paying them, so they're getting paid. We put them together on the team, but they, again, for back and forth. So that we're paying for their experience, their expertise to develop the best set of plans and a cost to do that. So absolutely, we would go forward. If we can't come to an agreement on the price for that contractor to do the work, and it's not a fair price to the taxpayer, then we move to being competitively bid it, and the work product we would have, that would be contractual. I mean, there's a contractual duty to provide that work product.
Ms. Anulowicz.
Would this bridge get a new name?
Yeah.
I think the General Assembly is able to dedicate and name things whatever they want to name them.
One would think.
I'll leave that up to this body.
25. It's
last one, I promise. So, so one other question on the bridge or the tunnel, either one. So, and I'm obviously a freshman, and I'm not sure, I'm not follow the budget as well as I should now. But so, does the Port Authority, should they not help on that out of their budget on the bridge, since essentially we're having to change it for them? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I would funding is good from anywhere, and I will say this: the work for the ultimate solution the Port Authority is funding some of that work, because we are working forward on what the ultimate solution is, and the Port Authority is funding that fully.
Thank you.
And now, let me just add to the estimate that we have now. We think for this cable replacement and the raise is about $175 million. That's what we've budgeted for and got into the tip and the stip ultimately. So to give you some bearing on what that is versus a full replacement, which would have a B behind the name in $1 billion, $1 billion or more. So, all right, let me move on very quickly. Just to update again, we'll stay in the Savannah area, the Hyundai Kia Meta plant in Bryan County. This is a little bit of a schematic. I'll orient you that Savannah is to the right of the page. It's sort of, I-16 actually runs, east-west. Savannah's to the right. What we're doing there to support the infrastructure is doing really three major things. Is one, building a frontage road. That's that green line that's in front of the mega site. There'll be a 4-lane divided frontage road that ties on to US 280. That's the yellow line. That's an existing interchange. US 280 is the access to that site today. The second thing we do is we install roundabouts at the existing interchange, roundabout at Oracle Parkway to the north, and then roundabout to the main frontage road there. And then we widen the frontage, we widen 280 down to that Olive Branch Road, which is a county road, which serves the back access to the Meta plant. That will again be a 4-lane divided roadway. And then the last thing we do is on the right side of the page is build a new interchange to serve the easternmost part of the site that connects over to old Collider Road. And so there's a new interchange being built there. So we bid the frontage road in June of this year. And 280 widening we bid in September of this year, and the interchange will be in July of next year. So all these align with the coming on the plant, except the interchange. The interchange takes longer. We're working through the federal approvals for that and to do that. This is about a $265 million investment for the infrastructure for Hyundai Kia Meta plant. The next slide is the Rivian East Atlanta mega site. Very similar. And this playbook, I might add, goes back to the same playbook we used in what we did when Kia came to town in West Point, building frontage roads, a new interchange, and upgrading the existing interchange. Same thing here, US 278, and building a frontage road. We're actually already under contract with that. We expect grading to begin this month on the frontage road and the upgrades on 278 and open to traffic sometime in summer of 2024. So this project's already underway. That was about a $49.3 million design build contract. The interchange, we'll do a design build contract, bids out October of this year, and expect it to be open in traffic in Q3 of calendar year 2025. This represents about a $163 million investment for the upgrades of 278 frontage road and the new interchange. So that's going on, and again, we're moving forward. Let me move quickly to the next slide, which all of you go through if you ever head to Savannah or anything down I-16, or if you go through Macon, Georgia. I-16, I-75 project, if you think it's gone on forever, it has. It is one complicated project. There's actually 6 phases of this project. We are in construction on phases 1 is actually complete through 5. We estimate completion of phase 5 will be in 2024. Pay attention as you go through there because we keep changing things. We keep opening pieces and parts of these various phases. This one interchange was so big and so complicated, we couldn't bid it in one package. It cost literally, we knew it would take about a decade to build all of this. And we've been at it now for a while. In the last phase, the most complicated part is the purple line to the top of the page, phase 6, where we have to basically replace the interstate, widen the interstate, over the railroad while maintaining railroad traffic and adjacent to the river. It is extremely complicated. That goes to construction. We'll bid that and go to construction in 2025. A little over $600 million total cost of that project. But this is the freight nexus, as I like to call it. This is where all that freight traffic out of Savannah ends up in Macon at I-75. And so this is a very complicated and busy location, but a big investment there, and glad to do it. Last slide. I've showed you this slide before, and I want to just conclude on some thoughts about the funding is not something we enter, as the future is something we create. And certainly this Transportation Committee has a big creative voice and hand in shaping our future for transportation. I want to talk just a little bit about funding. Go back to Representative Fry's comments about what's the relationship here to funding. I highlighted 18 construction projects that are underway or about to be underway. So we walked through 18 projects. I didn't count them. They represent $5.9 billion in 18 projects, to give you some perspective. The 4-county coastal empire study I mentioned of Chatham, Effingham, Bryan, and Bullock, $1 billion needed by 2050 in 4 counties. I'm going to give you some cost. Our current cost to widen a road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes in a rural area, $9.4 million a mile. 2 to 4 lanes in an urban area, $18 million a mile. Where, back to Representative comment about right-of-way, often in urban areas, the right-of-way cost will be on par with the construction cost. To widen the interstate, a rural interstate, from 2 lanes or 4 lanes to 6 lanes, where you don't have to buy any right-of-way, you just close up the middle, is averaging $18 million a mile. New interchanges, a new interchange, not an upgrade of interchange, a new interchange, 80 to 100 million an interchange, to give you some perspective. Now, I've gave you a taste of how much tonnage, basically almost doubling by 2050, it's going to take. So if we want to keep things moving at least as good as they are today, we're going to have to make tremendous investment. Mr. Chairman, I'll look back to 2019 in November, where I presented to the Freight and Logistics Committee down in Waycross, right in Whip Burgett's back door, right there in his front door, rather. I testified back then over the 30-year horizon to do the things we needed to do based on the old freight plan, that we needed $3.2 to $3.7 billion a year. And with this new freight plan, I can safely say that that number has not gone down. I know that Janine and her team is wrapping up this freight plan, and we're going to be able to provide you with some corridor type analysis of investments that need to be made. A lot of interstate, but if you go back and look at that 2019 map of where freight is flowing, you can see a lot of it is not interstates. So I can safely say that it's still $3.2 billion or more a year to get to the place we want to be by 2050. And so that is a big marker. But we are a little bit of the dog that has caught the car. That we had great success. We want Georgia to continue to be the #1 state to do business. And it's going to take some tremendous investments to make that happen, and that we keep people moving safely and freight moving efficiently and effectively, and most important, safely across our network. So I thank you for this opportunity to give you a deep dive, and look forward to that. Hopefully Janine can come back and give you the sort of the meat behind the data that gets to these things, because at the end of the day, there is a big return on investment number that they have that shows you what the benefit is to business. I think about infrastructure and what we build, but at the end of the day, this is all about business of this state. And she's got some great data that will show you how each of the agribusiness, manufacturing, and e-commerce benefits by making these investments, such that they go back to that reliability, speed, safety, and reducing their risk, so at a bottom line. So thank you for the opportunity, and glad to entertain any further questions.
We've got a few questions. Mr. McCollum, 25. Thank you.
He said last question, didn't he?
I know, I did. I apologize. I want to thank you for coming. It's been a great and very insightful. I have one thing. I need about 6 miles in my district to get done, and the reason I say that, so the mega sites, which is great. I'm glad the governor has done that. I'm just curious of how Kia, Rivian, all those mega sites have impacted your budget. To my point was 6 miles, and how far that's put us behind on just those projects in our districts for the mega sites, and what impact that's had on GDOT's budget, and then also just how much has those mega sites, the Kia, Rivian, all them, have they put into the projects, if any, and just if you'd speak to just how far that's put us behind and how that's impacted GDOT's budget, because it's obviously not enough. So, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for that. Well, one, obviously, when we have these great economic successes, those will become very, very much priority. No different than when Kia came to Georgia, all these years ago, I guess 2008 or so. That's a state priority. So then we prioritize, and again, the planning director's responsibility is to prioritize and choose the projects. So, and we work very closely. So the Rivian and Kia is about $428 million combined. And that's hitting our budget over about 3 to 4 years. So it's not all in 1 year, but it's just sort of commensurately in each of those years. That's the budget impact of what that means. When I say impact, it's just, we're working with the revenues we have and be strategic, but we're having to advance those and for good reason. So that's about the impact. It's over about 4 years. And again, I gave you some rough numbers. Interchanges are about $80 to $100 million. The interchanges are happening, though, in budget year 24 and 23 and 24 as we get those out, and maybe 25. I had to look back at the phasing of those, how they hit the budget. So it's a little bit of a parsed out impact.
Oh, sure.
So I guess my question would be, obviously, we didn't have them in the past, which, like I said, I appreciate them and the governor's, work on those. So that money for the mega sites before would have come to the rest of the state. So I guess my question is would that money needed to be added on top of your normal budget anyway, or would that be beneficial to you, obviously?
That would keep things moving, yeah, keep everything moving.
Mr. Fry, 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Commissioner, just like I said that the delivery industry is the lifeblood of the state, you guys are the arteries and veins, and they're equally as important. And so I appreciate your information that you bring to us. Overall, as a percentage of a state budget, what we spend on transportation and what you're saying we need about per year, it sounds 10%-ish. Do you have any idea about the comparisons across the nation as to states who invest in their transportation infrastructure at that level, or what is the good general gist of it?
Yeah, well, we can pull that. I don't want to speak from the top of my head. I do know from the biennial and previous budget presentation that on the sort of per capita spending, we're sort of mid-pack as it relates to the nation. And we're sort of proud of the fact that we have some of the best conditions, but we're sort of mid-pack on per capita when you look at per capita spending. But we can refine that and try to follow up with that. It's a fair question.
I think it's an interesting follow.
Yes, sir.
I think it's an interesting concept, and again, to highlight the work that y'all do, we are being in the middle of the pack at a per capita spending, so there is room for us to actually improve our spending model. So thank you.
And lastly, Mr. Holly, excuse me.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for the presentation, Commissioner. I think to follow Representative Fry's metaphor, if transportation is the lifeblood and you all are the arteries and veins, I'm curious about the food for the brains. And that being that if you can make a pitch for the type of transportation funding necessary, I'm curious about the type of policy model that you would like for us to be able to speak. I think we're all well familiar of the pushback that you received from my local Henry County commissioners who, when you attended to have GDOT come and build out a lot of our roadways, that was kind of turned away because we've long been a very kind of a small, sleepy farm community, but that all has since changed. And so I know that a lot of money that's coming in to do the build outs, you require some commitments internally from our local counties, and knowing too, especially looking at these figures that are just going to metastasize, what type of is there a particular framework that you see that we as legislators need to convey to our local commissioners, being that these main arteries that we see today actually may grow. And so even those communities that have long been, thought themselves to be, there to be a buffer there, that buffer actually might erode because of this huge demand coming up from the port. Is there a pitch that you think particularly works on our end that is beyond simply having the funding, but actually getting locals to be able to see what may be coming into their neighborhoods?
So, well, thank you for that. And I would say, too, that obviously Henry County has continued to grow, and we enjoy a good partnership now. And Henry County is actually investing some design dollars and a little bit of right-of-way dollars to expand some state routes to help get the moving forward. So I think that's a good policy thing, is sort of we're all in this together, because, manufacturing, agribusiness, and e-commerce certainly travel on everybody's roads. I mean, it's not just a state highway issue, and, and especially, and I will say this, too, let me make sure I'm clear. This isn't all induced by the ports. The manufacturing growth, agribusiness, this is Georgia growing, and again, so it's not just a port causing all this. It's because of all the things we laid out as we continue to grow in Georgia, and you saw the percentage moving through. But I think from a policy point of view, those things are, we got to figure out how to come together. And then land use is a big one as well, right? I mean, and that which the state doesn't control. Land use is a real big one, especially in your part of the world, as with all the warehouse distribution, which is, again, strategic in nature. Just geographically, you're in that sort of sweet spot for where things need to be, where population is to the north, in manufacturing, and even in the ports too to the south is where it is. So I think that's good. But the other thing I'd say is I think this body did a good job with HB 617. It laid out the framework. That is the policy framework that would help be successful going forward.
Thank you. I just want to call out somebody that's standing in the back that's very important in this discussion is Seth Milliken also. See, he had a sore throat and he couldn't talk, but Derek, look up for your phone. Wave at him, Seth.
If Seth could talk, he said you can't wait for freight.
Yeah. And so I think, those of y'all have questions about this incredibly important issue that we're going to deal with in the next years. He's a very good point too, along with Josh and the commissioner. I think just a couple things you asked about, just the plain question. These extra projects, do they push other projects down the line? Yes, they do. That's just a function of dollars, and so I just I can answer it straight. And but that's something that we need to think about how we address and how we put more or find ways to put more money in this world. I think the members. I wish everybody was in here because you guys have a intimate knowledge now about what the issue is. You need to talk to the people that you sit beside because they don't. I mean, I think they know that there's traffic in Henry County and they say, golly, what a great project that's going on in Macon. But they don't get it like you get it. And I think it's going to behoove us to get our message to our members because, we have to do something. I don't think there's no question about that. It's just how we go about it. And we talk about it every day. And in 218, it's my office is always open. If you want to talk about it with me, and Seth is there a lot of times, so are many other people. And of course, Josh also. That's Josh's second home. Wait a minute. Push 20. You're 25.
Yes, sir. Is it possible we could get a dollar breakdown of how much the mega sites have impacted the DOT's budget? Is that something that can be done?
We can share with the project cost what they are.
Yeah, he kind of did. He
Yeah,
did
okay.
as
Well,
he talked about them right then.
Well, I mean, just actually like a dollar amount. I mean, you said that was just for the ones now, 465.
428 for the two sites, 428 million for.
But we've obviously had a lot more mega sites, like you said. They keep coming every day. So essentially, which is good. I'm not saying, but I'm just concerned about how much impact they have over the DOT's budget, which I realize that's what you do. But if you think about the little small roads and turning lanes and things in our districts, if that impacts those mega sites, are impacting that, there again, that's money we need to bring to y'all to be able to continue to do the projects in our districts that are needed. Would you agree or disagree, or can you either way?
We
I don't
have-
get you in
let's
I don't
not-
back you in a corner.
We have plenty of things to do as demonstrated by what we presented today, so.
Yeah,
Flowered branch, he's not coming.
I know where he lives.
Commissioner,
his
you've been
neighbor.
great. You've been gracious with your time this morning, and thank you. I mean, I appreciate you letting people ask questions as we go through, because
Absolutely.
at the end, it just gets all tangled up, and I love to do it that way, members, and because as you think of it, you can ask.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that, and I'm certainly glad to answer any questions, but I leave you with this pretty powerful quote. Again, the future is something we create. We need to create the future that we want. And I go back to what I said in my introductory comments. Doing nothing doesn't mean things stay the same.
Oh, well.
It degrades. And
Yeah,
degrades
we look
quickly.
forward to the freight plan very much, and I think what I'll probably try to do, I don't know if we'll do it this session or not, because we'll probably run out of time, but have a big meeting, invite all the members who would like to come into like 341 or something like that, and let the planning director talk to the General Assembly at large one afternoon. I think it'd be very helpful.
Thank
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.